Vice President for Housing and Capital Development, which means I build all of our buildings, and for a decade or more I was our Chief Financial Officer. And I, like everybody else, had a prepared speech, but it kind of doesn't make any sense to use it anymore because you've all heard the statistics. Before I came to Housing Works in 1989, I worked for a little-known entity called the Division of AIDS Services. Does anybody remember?
Yeah.
Now it's got a fancy new name called HASA. And I was hired as what was called a provisional case manager. There was about 15 of us. My job was to help people stay housed. People who came who were losing their apartments because they had exhausted every financial resource they had to pay their rent. And what we found was I had to turn probably 2 of every 3 of the people who came to me for assistance away because they did not have an AIDS diagnosis.
Wow. That ain't right!
So people who could have stayed in their homes and avoided housing, avoided homelessness, wound up on the streets, and I can tell you, back then, inevitably died. My clients died before I could house them. Wow. So I said, that ain't right.
That ain't right.
And I found this wonderful organization, Housing Works, where I've spent most of my adult life. Woo. And Housing Works was founded on the premise that it could give anyone, regardless of their situation in life, regardless if they use drugs, regardless if they have mental illness, regardless if they're transgender, regardless of any of those things, a decent, safe, affordable place to live. They can not only live, they can thrive. Yeah. I was in charge of our intake department. I worked for Ginny Schubert, who's over here somewhere. And my colleague Valerie Jimenez was part of that team. And the same nonsense happened over and over and over again. People would come in, they were sleeping on the trains, the subways. Val and I went up to those big old armory shelters to meet with people. And they would come to us and they would come with those M11Qs. Anybody remember an M11Q? Yeah. And those M11Qs would say HIV positive, asymptomatic. And I would say, sorry, there's nothing I can do.
Oh, wow.
That ain't right.
You gotta go back to the shelter. I can give you a token and you can sleep on the subway and I can give you half of my peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Wow.
But come back tomorrow and let's see what we can do. And they'd come back tomorrow. And Val remembers this, we had a script and we would call their doctor and we would say, you know what? If on that M11Q, you just say they had pneumonia twice, the situation will change. And those doctors sometimes would be like, oh, I can't do that. And we'd say, okay, well, just so you know, the client told us they had pneumonia twice, but if you won't write it on a piece of paper, they're going back to sleep on the sidewalk in the subway. And that ain't right.
That ain't right.
So to have to engage in those kind of tactics to get people a basic place to live, food and nutrition that they need, is ridiculous. And we're still doing it today. What is wrong with this? Something is wrong with this that we are living in 1989 when it's 2014.
That ain't right.
So what we need is a concerted effort to realize that what is driving this epidemic is not access to drugs, not access to good health care. It's access to the basic food, nutrition, and shelter that people with HIV need to engage in those services that are available to them. So that's what we're doing here today. We're gathered here today to say, get out of 1983, get out of 1985, get out of 1989, and join us in 2014. And we got to make sure the door isn't just open for this small group of people who have that, I don't even know if you have M11Qs anymore, it's been a long time, but have that piece of paper that says they have an AIDS diagnosis or are HIV symptomatic. We need to open that door for every single one of our brothers and sisters living with HIV in New York.